The vast network of highways spanning the United States is vital for commerce and travel. It's also become the backdrop for a grim and largely unseen phenomenon: serial killings linked to long-haul truck drivers. The mobility afforded by the trucking profession and the often transient lifestyles of individuals frequenting truck stops create a unique set of challenges for law enforcement seeking to identify and apprehend these offenders. The FBI has established the Highway Serial Killer Initiative to address this specific issue. Let's talk about it. Let's get spooky. Hey, spooky people. It's your best friend Kenny here, and before we get to the video, I want to make sure that you are subscribed to this channel, TheSpookyLawyer. I want to make sure that you like and share this video. Go ahead and email this video to your congressperson. Say, hey, you guys are doing a terrible job. Also, check out Kenny. I would appreciate it. The FBI Highway Serial Killer Initiative began in 2004 when an analyst at the Oklahoma Bureau of Investigations identified a disturbing pattern of murdered women whose bodies were being discovered along the Interstate 40 corridor, stretching across Oklahoma, Texas, Arkansas, and Mississippi. This observation brought attention to the FBI's Violent Criminal Apprehension Program and revealed a potential link between these deaths and the transient nature of long-haul trucking. Now look, that's not to say that long-haul truckers are necessarily or generally bad people. It just so happens that there are a significant number of long-haul truckers who happen to be serial killers. And it's kind of a chicken or the egg situation. I don't know that serial killers necessarily decide to become long-haul truckers to help with their serial killing, or if a long-haul trucker suddenly becomes a serial killer. So truckers, long-haul truckers, I'm not criticizing the profession. I'm not criticizing any of you. There are plenty of good ones. Just like every other profession, there's just some bad seeds out there. And it turns out that this particular profession allows for the ability to commit these types of crimes in a way that often gets them to not get caught. The FBI learned that there was a broader issue of highway-related killings across the nation. And this realization made the FBI launch an extension effort to support state and local law enforcement in their investigations of these highway murders. The Highway Serial Killings Initiative was officially announced to the public in April 2009, marking the formal commitment to addressing the specific category of violent crime. The FBI's efforts under this initiative extend beyond its formal launch date, with its investigations looking into highway killings dating back to the late 1980s, indicating a long-term investigation into resolving these decade-old cases. There was a rise of serial killers in the United States during the 1970s, coupled with the establishment of the FBI's Behavioral Science Unit in 1972 and the implementation of VICAP in the 1980s. This provided foundational infrastructure and expertise that would eventually support the development of a specialized initiative focused on highway serial killings. The primary purpose of the FBI Highway Serial Killer Initiative is to identify and link unsolved cases of murders that occur along or near the nation's highways, with a particular focus on suspects who are long-haul truck drivers. A significant aspect of the initiative involves addressing the vulnerability of victims who often lead high-risk, transient lifestyles that may include substance abuse or involvement in sex work. Again, as we talk about, these are vulnerable people, people who are addicted to drugs, people who are homeless, people who are sex workers, have a higher likelihood of being victims of violent crimes, and especially of being victims of serial killers. By focusing on this specific type of crime and its common characteristics, the FBI aims to raise awareness among both law enforcement agencies and the general public about the dangers and the ongoing efforts to combat them. Now, a huge problem with these types of cases is when highways are involved, there's usually multiple states which require many different jurisdictions. You've got town, county, state, and FBI all trying to work together. And that allowed for a lot of space for a lot of these serial killers to get through. A key goal of the Highway Serial Killers Initiative is to facilitate collaboration between all these jurisdictions and all these law enforcement agencies to connect their individual cases to similar incidents that may have occurred in other parts of the country. And this is how they can identify potential serial killers. The overarching goal of the Highway Serial Killer Initiative is to detect patterns, deter potential offenders, and stop the continued killings that have been occurring along America's highways. The FBI's methodology for addressing highway serial killings relies on the Violent Criminal Apprehension Program, or VICAP, which serves as the national repository for data-related serial violent crimes. VICAP's databases contain extensive information on homicides, SAs, missing persons, and unidentified human remains, making it a tool for identifying connections between seemingly unrelated cases across different jurisdictions. What's crazy to me is in the 60s and 70s, you could just sort of move from state to state or even from county to county and get away with committing a significant amount of crimes because these jurisdictions didn't talk together well. They didn't have the tools to communicate with each other well. So it makes sense that these types of individuals found this way to commit these types of crimes. For a case to be considered under the Highway Serial Killer Initiative, it typically must meet specific criteria, including the discovery of a victim's body within a certain proximity to an interstate highway, the victim being female, as this is the most common demographic targeted by trucker serial killers, and the victim's last known location being at or near a highway truck stop. Now, I think the second part of that is interesting because, again, obviously, women are frequently the target of serial killers. Frequently. But the next demographic that is frequently the target of serial killers are gay men. And it's interesting to me that gay men don't necessarily meet the criteria to be under the Highway Serial Killer Initiative. And I suppose there's issues with that. There's a man killed. How would they know that this person is gay, right? I get that. But, it seems like there is a vast hole here, especially with what we know about some of the most famous serial killers, Dahmer, Gacy, etc. Particularly specifically targeted gay men who were vulnerable individuals. A core investigative technique employed is linkage analysis, which includes the systemic matching of physical and behavioral evidence gathered from multiple crime scenes to determine if these crimes are likely associated with the same offender or group of offenders. VICAP analysts develop detailed timelines for potential suspects utilizing various sources of information, including trucking company logs, gas station receipts, way station records, and other available data to establish a suspect's whereabouts during the times when the murders occurred. You can absolutely be assured that camera footage, surveillance camera footage, now that it's ubiquitous, license plate camera footage is being used by the FBI also. They just don't want to talk about it because they don't want you to know, or they don't want you to know if you're a serial killer. But if you're watching this channel, you might be. This data and the analysis of this data is crucial given the mobility of long-haul trucker serial killers. The FBI also provides assistance to local law enforcement agencies investigating these cases, and they offer these resources like the timeline data, guidance on obtaining necessary records through subpoenas, and facilitating contact with other police departments that may be investigating similar incidents. The FBI actively sponsors free regional training sessions specifically focused on highway serial killings. Initiative for law enforcement agencies located near major highways and interstates. And the Highway Serial Killing Initiative leverages the expertise of behavioral analysts experts from the FBI's National Center for Analysis of Violent Crime, who can offer crucial investigative and interview strategies, as well as guidance on linking cases based on behavioral characteristics and developing unknown offender profiles. So basically, the FBI offers all these resources to these local law enforcement agencies to investigate these crimes so they can link them up. Makes sense. And I can tell you that, the FBI is going to have better resources. Any federal institution is going to have better resources than some local town, especially in the middle of nowhere. And you have to, and if you've ever driven on the nation's highways, there's a whole lot of nowhere out there, right? The profile of individuals suspected of being highway serial killers overwhelmingly points to long-haul truck drivers. This is the primary suspect pool identified by the FBI. Now, again, like I said, the vast majority of truck drivers in the United States are hardworking, law-abiding individuals who are dedicated to their profession. They're good people who work hard and are just trying to make a living for their families. Again, no hate to long-haul truck drivers. It just so happens that there are a lot of long-haul truck drivers who do this. Therefore, the Highway Serial Killing Initiative focuses on a very small fraction of this population. There appears to be a notable overlap between certain personality traits that might attract individuals to the occupation of long-haul trucking and characteristics that may have been observed in some serial killers, particularly an antisocial inclination and a preference for working independently with minimal social interaction. Now look, I consider myself an antisocial extrovert, and I have a preference for working independently with minimal social interaction also, but that's just in my practice of law. And unfortunately, when you practice law, you really don't get minimal social interaction, and you also don't get as much traveling time as long-haul truckers. So don't look at me. I'm not a serial killer. The lifestyle of long-haul truckers can be demanding, unhealthy, and characterized by prolonged periods of isolation, irregular schedules, and stress related to deadlines and traffic, and limited opportunities for exercise, healthy eating, potentially leading to loneliness and in some cases substance abuse. There's a small set of these individuals with pre-existing violent tendencies, and the unique aspects of this occupation, especially the isolation and independence, may unfortunately contribute to or exacerbate those tendencies, creating an environment that supports violent criminal activity. A key characteristic of highway serial killers is their ability to exploit the mobile nature of their profession to commit crimes across numerous state and local jurisdictions, making it more challenging for law enforcement to connect seemingly isolated incidents. The typical pattern involves the offender picking up a victim, or a sex worker, or a hitchhiker at a truck stop or service station. The crime itself often takes place within the relatively privacy of a truck cab, which can sometimes even be modified into a mobile torture chamber. And that's happened. There have been mobile torture chamber truck cabs. And we'll get to that. The victim's body is then often dumped along a desolate stretch of a highway in a different jurisdiction, further complicating the investigation. Victim goes missing in one jurisdiction, body found in another jurisdiction. The motivations behind these crimes are varied. Sometimes stemming from sexual predation, sadistic urges, a fundamental desire to kill, feelings of loneliness and isolation, a need to exert power and control of others. A significant factor contributing to the vulnerability of victims is their often marginalized status as sex workers who may be struggling with drug addiction or homelessness, making them less likely to be reported missing and have their cases thoroughly investigated initially. How many times have we seen, either homeless people, unhoused people, people with drug addiction problems, and especially sex workers who are victims of violent crimes, and yet law enforcement doesn't put the resources necessary to investigate those crimes? And also, how often are those people women of color? Very frequently, which is terrible. Now let's talk about some examples of long-haul trucker serial killers. Robert Ben Rhoades was known as the truck stop killer, and he operated from the mid-1970s to 1990. He is suspected of killing over 50 women, though only 4 victims have been confirmed. Rhoades converted the sleeper cab of his truck into a torture chamber, where he would hold women captive for weeks, torturing and SAing them before killing them. His victims included a 14-year-old runaway whose torture and murder were documented in photographs found in Rhoades' home. Rhoades was eventually apprehended in Arizona after a trooper discovered a live, shackled woman in his truck. He was sentenced to life in prison without parole in Illinois for the 14-year-old's murder and later received a second life sentence in Texas. Wayne Adam Ford was another long-haul truck driver who murdered at least 4 women between 1997 and 1998. Ford would strangle his victims and dismembered 3 of the 4. When he turned himself into the police in California in 1998, he was carrying a severed breast of one of his victims in his pockets. Ford confessed to killing Carrie Ann Cummings, Tina Renee Gibbs, Lynette Dayan White, and Patricia Ann Tamez, and he was convicted of 4 counts of first-degree murder in 2006 and sentenced to death. Keith Jesperson, who is known as the Happy Face Killer, due to the smiley faces he would draw on letters confessing to his crimes, how nice, right? Murdered at least 8 women across several states between 1990 and 1995. Jesperson would meet his victims at truck stops, SA, and strangle them. He confessed to numerous murders, claiming up to 160 victims, though only 8 have been confirmed. Jesperson is currently serving multiple life sentences in Oregon. And it's always crazy to me that a lot of these serial killers try to beef up their numbers. It's like, they get caught and then they want to seem like they're so much worse than they were because they know they're already going to jail forever, so why not? But it's also crazy to think that there's a possibility that this guy may have had 160 victims, which is mind-boggling. Sean Patrick Goble, who is known as the Interstate Killer, not a very colorful nickname there, but I guess it explains what he did. Kidnapped and murdered at least 4 women in the southern United States between 1994 and 1995 while working as a truck driver. Goble confessed and received multiple life sentences in Tennessee and North Carolina. He's also been investigated in connection with other unsolved killings of women in numerous states. Warren Luther Alexander was arrested in 2022 and was charged in connection with the 1992 cold case murder of Nona Cobb in North Carolina. Subsequent DNA testing linked him to 3 additional cold case murders of Kimberly Carol Fritz, Velvet Ann Sanchez, and Lorraine Ann Rodriguez in Ventura County, California in 1977. All 4 women were sex workers and had been strangled. Alexander has been extradited to California to face charges in the 1977 murders while awaiting trial in North Carolina for Cobb's murder. John Fenberry murdered 5 people across 4 states between 1990 and 1991, all of whom he befriended. Nice guy. He befriended them before murdering them. Fenberry also confessed to an additional 1984 murder. He was convicted and sentenced to death in Ohio for the murder of Joseph Darren and was ultimately executed in 2009. Chester Todd was suspected by the FBI of multiple SAs and murders of women while working as a truck driver. He went on the run in 1996 and was apprehended in Las Vegas in 2011, living under an assumed name. While suspected in connection of highway serial killings, Todd has never been formally charged in those cases. Patrick Kearney, who is known as the Trash Bag Killer, murdered at least 21 young men and boys in Southern California between 1962 and 1977. Although he was not exclusively a long-haul truck driver during his entire period of serial killing, he was one and did utilize his vehicle to pick up victims, often hitchhikers or young men from gay bars. His MO involved shooting his victims in the head, engaging in relations with their unalived bodies, and then dismembering their bodies and disposing them in trash bags along freeways and in remote areas. Kearney confessed to 28 murders and pled guilty to 21, receiving a life sentence in prison. Now, this is a lot of serial killers, and there's more. I can go on and on about various cases where there are people who disappeared on or near highways where truck drivers or people who are frequently these highways are suspected of these crimes. And I will probably do that in a different video. But it's crazy to think that these dangers existed, and a lot of these people got away with their crimes for a really long time. Well, why did they get away with them? Well, we talked about that a little bit earlier, but the primary issue was the jurisdictional issues in investigating the highway serial killer. There's problems with communication, coordination, and sharing of critical information between various law enforcement agencies, which allowed these people to continue their crimes undetected for longer periods. Another issue is both the offenders and the victims happen to have sort of a transient nature to them. Long-haul truckers, by definition, are extremely mobile. They spend extended periods of time traveling across state lines, and the victims often had transient lifestyles also. Tracking a suspect who could be anywhere in the country at any given time required a lot of resources and coordination. Less so now, of course, now that they have license plate cameras and cameras everywhere. But still, the victims may not have had strong social ties or a consistent place of residence, which could delay them being reported missing. They might not have good relationships with their families, which could also delay them in being reported missing. There's also a massive issue with evidence, including witnesses and forensic evidence. These killings often occurred in remote or isolated locations along interstates where there are typically few witnesses to the crime itself. Very few people are witnessing a crime that happens in a closed cab, especially if the cab is prepared to not have windows or soundproof. The act of dumping a body from a moving vehicle onto the side of the highway minimizes the chances of leaving behind significant forensic evidence that could directly link an offender to the victim. And the time that elapsed between the commission of the crime and the discovery of the body can also lead to the degradation and loss of crucial evidence due to environmental factors. If a body is sitting at the side of the road or close to the side of the road, there could be rain, there could be snow, there could be dust, there could be wind, all sorts of things that sort of can destroy a lot of forensic evidence. As technology has advanced, it's made it easier to solve these crimes. DNA analysis and databases, including the use of forensic genealogy, 21andMe. Again, you thought you were finding out your heritage, but you're really just snitching on your serial killing family. These databases have become an invaluable tool in solving cold cases, including those involving highway serial killers. The ability to extract and analyze degraded DNA from old crime scenes and then compare it to vast genealogical databases has led to breakthroughs in cases that were unsolved for decades, including in the Warren Luther Alexander case. The FBI's Violent Criminal Apprehension Program, VICAP, is a major part of the effort to combat highway serial killings because it provides a centralized platform for data sharing and communication among law enforcement agencies at all levels. This database allows investigators to put in details about their cases and compare them against a national matrix of similar crime, potentially identifying links and suspects that would otherwise be missed due to jurisdictional boundaries. This has also led to the formation of multi-jurisdictional task forces, bringing together investigators from different agencies to collaborate on specific cases or patterns of crime. And the trucking industry itself has also increased its tracking technology, specifically with corporate-owned vehicles. Data from these tracking devices, along with electronic logging devices that record drivers' hours, service, and locations, can provide information about the suspect's movements and whereabouts during the time a crime was committed. Now, a lot of independent truck drivers may not utilize these technologies, although some are forced to by their contractor, right? This information is a significant resource for investigators. And man, if you're on the clock and committing these crimes, you kind of have to assume that whatever data you're giving off isn't private. Same thing with your cell phone. Interesting, the trucking industry itself has engaged in efforts to combat the problem, particularly concerning the issue of sex trafficking, which is often linked to these crimes. Organizations within the trucking industry work to raise awareness among drivers and provide resources for reporting suspicious activity, demonstrating a commitment to safety and ethical conduct within their profession. There is an organization called Truckers Against Trafficking, which works to educate and empower truck drivers to recognize and report instances of human trafficking, which has helped in combating these types of crime. Serial killing among long-haul truck drivers are a disturbing reality on America's highways. And for a long time, it's posed significant challenges to law enforcement. It's fascinating that there is a pool of suspects that the FBI is currently monitoring that they believe to be linked to unknown serial killers. But it's also fascinating to learn how law enforcement and the industry itself has made strides to end these heinous crimes. Make sure that you are subscribed to this channel, The Spooky Lawyer. Make sure that you are following me on Blue Sky and Twitter. My username is akbruce. If there is a spooky or disturbing story you would like me to cover, send me an email. My email address is thespookylawyer@gmail.com. I'm happy to research it, look into it, make a video on it. If you'd like to support the channel, there is a super thanks button in the YouTube toolbar. You can hit that and make a donation to the channel. Any money that this channel makes goes right back into the channel. I've talked about this before, but there's going to be some exciting stuff that we've got in the hopper coming along the way. But I also appreciate that you watch these videos and share these videos and hit like on these videos. All those things help me out a lot, and I very much appreciate you watching my videos. It means a lot to me. And please make sure that you stay spooky.